Are you looking for a podcast where you can hear from real people regarding their real dental drama? If so, then you've come to the right place. Join hosts Bethany Petty and Dr. Reena Kuba as we dive into the solutions we've created and the mistakes we've made while managing dental drama. Let's get started.
So we're back here with, much to my part 2 of COVID. And as we were about to record this, I was having a little tantrum and going, I don't want to talk about COVID again. It's so depressing. And let's talk about something else. What else do we have to talk about? And as we were kind of brainstorming other topics that we've thought about, that clients have asked for and all, in the past was marketing. And I'm like, yeah, nobody wants to think about marketing. Right? Marketing for who? For what? For the office we have with no staff? Like, come on in. Our doors are practically closed. Definitely not going to waste marketing dollars at this time. And then what was the other one about?
Treatment acceptance.
Treatment acceptance. Well, get a patient in the door. Nobody's coming in because everybody's sick at home with COVID. Anyway, yeah, come accept the treatment. And then I can't do it because I don't have an assistant. So...
I'm going to have to reschedule you because my assistant called in. So, yeah.
Oh, that's the only reason you called me because I'm the 6th office because all the other 5 canceled you too for the same reason? Okay, well, we'll be a part of that queue now. So anyway, I didn't want to talk about COVID, but honestly, it's the most relevant thing right now.
It is.
And Bethany, that's what I was like, well, aren't any of your clients asking you about anything else? There are no other problems that are coming up and you're like, no, not really. Okay. All right.
It's pervasive.
It's pervasive.
And it was really interesting, even as we just looked through our list of topics that we made months ago, right? We've had this running list of topics. Nothing seemed to fit. And so I think it just proves that right now, in this moment, the most relevant thing is this COVID resurgence hitting. And we talked about it a little bit from the staffing side last time. We didn't really dabble in the patient side of it, which is another huge stressor for practice owners that, they actually have staff. Yay. And we've got this great schedule. So, wow, I'm actually going to get some production out of today. I'm going to be able to pay bills. Like the financial aspect of this is absolutely a stressor. And as practice owners are watching their schedules fall apart on a daily basis, it does prompt a lot of questions like, well, what do I do with that? I mean, it doesn't feel solvable because COVID... most patients are canceling due to COVID-related reasons. I was exposed, or I am sick, or my child is sick, or whatever the case may be. And so a lot of that feels uncontrollable, but do we have any control in that? And then, the secondary component of that is, well, what do I do when every day is falling apart? At some point, I have to consider long-term ramifications of, do I have money in the bank to be able to pay these staff members or temps that I've hired to bring in. So I do think it's very relevant, and it's another stress factor that's hitting offices right now.
And now you're going to tell us what to do about it? You've got a solution for us?
Oh, it's the perfect solution. And actually 10 perfect solutions. No, I have a few thoughts, a few suggestions, then that's about all we can do right now. So one of the first things I wanted to ask about that has come up, and I wanted to get your feedback on this. So obviously, we're getting lots of patients calling in with either COVID themselves, COVID-like symptoms, or they've been exposed. And so this came up with a client this week where they weren't, historically when we've had cancellations, we've got this creative way to handle the cancellation call and try to retain that patient on the schedule. And that way we can kind of minimize the risk. That's kind of out the door right now. Specifically, if a patient is COVID positive, of course, it's out the door. Or COVID-like symptoms, we're not really arguing or pushing back on that. What is your take, though, on, or any advice that you have for somebody that's like, where do we draw the line? I mean, exposure is such a loose term. Thankfully, CDC has tried to kind of control what that actually means. But how do we really control for that when it comes to our schedule and our patients that are calling in? When do we kind of draw that line and go, oh, no, you're okay to come in, and maybe you're not? And what would you recommend for practice owners on that?
I've always kind of done do you feel like coming in?
Yeah.
And so, it is hard to say how many are saying they have COVID when really they don't want to get out of a work meeting, or they don't want to, it's but I think I've just got to take it on its face value, and it's the same thing that we did when we were completely shut down in Texas. What was it? Whatever April that was, we were completely shut down. And was that 2020?
2020. Yeah.
Okay, golly, that was 2 years ago almost.
2 years ago.
Okay, time is flying. Okay, so, and we had to shut down, and it was for emergencies only. And everybody's interpretation of what an emergency was different.
Right.
And so for me, I kind of thought, well, damned if I do, damned if I don't. What am I doing here? And so ultimately, to me, everything always comes back to what is best for the patient. And so I feel like in so many different ways, that's always the bottom line is I'm going to turn off the noise and just go, what is best for you? And so, we saw enough things that I was like, this wasn't no emergency, you fool. You got me and my staff and risking it all and doing whatever. However, that was kind of the thing on the phone was as we're triaging, what I didn't want was somebody who, had a permanent tooth knocked out and the parent doesn't know how to describe it. And I'm like, oh, that's not an emergency, don't come in. And it really was. And I don't know if that's the same for other practices, but in pedo, we really have, because we have the middleman, it's really hard for what a parent, considers a major emergency and not an emergency. So, again, I'm like, I'm not going to try to sort that out. There's no way. But if you are willing to risk your life in a pandemic and get out and bring your kid in our office, then I'm going to assume to you that it's a true emergency and I will be there for you. So same thing right now. I'm going under the assumption that everybody has COVID in my practice. The minute I walk in the door, I'm assuming my whole team has COVID and every patient has COVID. And if I'm here to serve you then, and if you need my help with something and you have come to the office seeking, short of course, like if you are clearly walking in and you look lethargic, and I mean, I don't think that's the problem we're having. Well, I take that back. I think there's plenty of people too, which adds to the tricky factor. There's plenty of people who are like, it's just a, 99 fever and he's coughing a little bit.
Yep.
I need you to see him.
Yeah, it's both sides.
It's both sides. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And so for me, it's, sometimes the staff is like, well, I think they may have this. They checked that there's a symptomatic person at home. Well, my answer to that team is, if you don't want to be near that patient, go ahead, go to the break room. Like, I'm not going to force you to see that patient. But on the other hand, like, I would hope you're assuming every patient
has it,
especially now with the Omicron. Like, I really do feel, I think that was part of the last episode we talked about the hope. I think part of that hope was the vaccine and the boosters and all of this. And so there's all this hope. And now, like, even besides all of that, and Omicron's like spiraled anyway. So I think it just really added to the defeating factor.
Right.
And so now, I kind of just say, well, even for listeners for that matter, we're in a new room today. We're actually at our house, my house. Usually we're in Bethany's
closet.
Our lovely office closet suite.
Yes.
But because of COVID and all of that, so here we are. And the debate we were having was, being around each other's kids and our kids being around each other. And my thought for that was, well, again, like everything else these past 2 years, we all kind of have to figure out what's right for our family.
Yeah.
And in our house, the kids are going, my kids went to this morning, one went to an indoor soccer game, the other one went to an indoor volleyball game, and then they both went to an indoor birthday party.
Yeah.
Really none of where they wore masks at all. Yeah. And so before you came over, you had some hesitation in bringing some of your kids over. And I said, that's on you. But as far as I'm concerned, I mean, it would be foolish of me to think that they're not getting exposed somewhere. So anyway, all of that to say, I kind of apply the same in the office, whether it's right or wrong or whatever, but that's just been my comfort level, is to just say, I'm assuming everybody's that's walking in the building has COVID. And if you are comfortable enough getting in the chair, then let's see you.
Right.
And if you're not, like the ones that are going, oh, we have a 98.7 today, I don't think it's safe for me to get out of my home. Yes, ma'am, I agree. Let us reschedule you. So that's kind of how we've been doing. What's everybody else doing?
And that's where I feel like a lot of people don't know. It's, and I feel like it's helpful to hear your feedback, because so much of it is patient comfort. And because it's such a divided topic still, maybe even more divided now than it was, we've got to toe that line carefully of applying pressure. So one of the topics that came up this week was, a patient called in to cancel. I've had close exposure to somebody. Well, the doctor knew, well, if you're vaccinated, according to CDC, if you're vaccinated and boosted, then close exposure technically doesn't apply to you because of what CDC says. But even that is a really awkward conversation to have with a patient. And where does that cross the line to go, oh, okay, so you've had close exposure. Well, are you vaccinated? I mean, even just that question alone can light a fire that you don't want to have to light, because then patient says no, and we go, okay, yeah, so you're right. We need to cancel your appointment. Or patient says, yes, I am vaccinated, and we go, oh, okay, well, did you know that means you still can come in? Well, I don't want to come in. I've had close exposure, right? So it's just there's no solid way to win that conversation. And so I think we've got to be very careful in the parameters that we set up. We've always had in offices cancellation policies, like what counts as a good excuse for canceling an appointment, which ones are we going to push back on?
I feel like all of that's out the window now.
Absolutely.
That has completely... we had it with a staff member the other day she had to leave early because she got called in that her kid had a fever and probably had COVID. And so the question, again, we're already so shorthanded. And here we go, another fly just dropped off, right? And so my manager came in and said, well, what do you want to do about this one? And so I pulled up the CDC guideline again, because I've been kind of reading it here and there, but honestly, it's like I'm still sticking my head up into the sand pit. I'm like, oh, CDC, you guys change your minds every 2 hours. Like, I can't keep up. So pulled up, and I was like, yeah, so if she's vaccinated, and I was like, do we know if she is or isn't? And I know there were some offices that mandated their entire staffs get vaccinated, and others who probably mandated none of their staff get vaccinated. You never know these days. I don't know. And so I didn't meddle in anybody's business. And so she's like, I don't know if she is or not. I said, okay, then here's our reply to her. If you are vaccinated and boosted, then, you feel okay coming in, you just have to keep your N95 on and whatever. We read off whatever the guideline is now. If you're not, then you need to blah, blah, blah. And then the next part of it was, well, even forget her own status of wanting to come in or not. She may not have childcare.
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, that's the next onion layer. But what I was afraid of was if I had said, no, you can't come back in just because you've had this exposure. She's also one that had a death in the family the week before. So she's missed a lot of work. And at what point is it going to be, you're not allowing me to come to work and earn a paycheck? So there are multiple stinky levels to this. And so I finally was just like, well, assuming she does have childcare and wants to come to work, then we're going this way or this way. So she's not vaxxed, then she's got to do this and this. And then I was like, so just leave it to her. So that way she doesn't feel like I'm getting into her business and into her private matters. Just give her that feedback, and then just ask her, and when do you plan to come back then?
Right.
Because that way, if you didn't want to admit you didn't get your vaccine, then you don't have to tell us that you're not coming back because of the vaccine issue or because of the childcare issue. It doesn't matter. Do the math yourself and tell me when you're coming back.
Yeah. Yeah. And then again, that kind of goes back to that uncertainty that we were talking about in the last episode. Yes, we've lost all control in that, but I think it is the name of the game right now, is we have lost control. We can't control that patient over the phone that is canceling. And if we start to try to control that, we tread in some really murky water that I feel like we have to be very careful of. Same thing with staff. I mean, we have maybe a little bit more control there, but even there, I feel like it's delicate. And I think we've got to be careful in that as well. And so is there, an end-all solution? No, it means we still have uncertainty, and we just need to have, again, maybe the worst of the worst, plans or solutions. It may be plan X, Y, and Z. We're at the bottom of the barrel, but we've at least got some way that we're able to finagle through this schedule.
Well, and that too, or I was just like, okay, well, hopefully she's going to be gone because the patients keep canceling. So it's like,
right.
Good. May as well. Please be the one that didn't get vaccinated, So, we did work out. I was like, well, looking at the schedule here, you're available, she's here, this person's going to do that. And by this point, we're like, every day is its own shuffle of what can we do and who can we see. And
and I think just if that becomes our expectation, I think removing that hope of ever getting back to a point, even though I think we'll get back to a point where we're more stable again. But I think if we go in expecting that, we're going to be chronically disappointed. And if we allow that disappointment to lead to mental fatigue and stress, and we've got to view it as, okay, I don't know what I'm walking into yet today, but we'll figure it out when we get there. And you know what? I got a sharp brain. I've at least got hopefully one person that's going to be there with me to help me solve whatever comes our way, and we're going to get through it. And so I think it's just that mindset shift of knowing I'm probably walking in and my schedule's going to fall apart. I'm probably walking in and half my staff is going to be missing. And you know what? Well, no need to worry or fret about it today, because who knows? Today's problems are probably going to be totally different than tomorrow's problems, and might as well just wait until tomorrow, see what comes our way, and we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. But I do think your perspective on the way that you've handled the patient side of it, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's the only way, but I think it's a very smart way, because it can get really murky if we try to get too controlling.
Well, and what I said in the last podcast, people are more crazy than ever right now, and I feel like between your staff and the patient, if they feel at all that they're being judged or bullied or pushed into an area where they're not comfortable, they're probably far more likely to take it out on you and complain to the insurance company about something or post a negative review. And so it's just one of those is it worth it at that point? And so especially with such a polarizing topic, and the stress is up to the ceiling and eyeball with, again, in the last podcast, we were talking about a lot of people not having their strong pillars of support.
Right.
And so we're dealing with very delicate, fragile people right now. And anything we do to try to push a button, it could really blow up quickly.
I think one of the things I would say is to try, and again, it's ever changing, but you do want to have at least some type of policy in your mind. And maybe that's a policy that's just fixed, but it's one that you can communicate, or the team can communicate confidently to patients. So for example, you mentioned, what do you mean my kid can't come in? He's just running a 99.2 and coughing a little bit. He's fine. I think in those moments, the staff needs to be well equipped with what is the office policy, so that they can communicate very black and white with, it's not, we're judging you because your kid's not vaccinated yet, and it can't feel unknown. And so I think this just goes back to lots of communication with the team on, okay, I know CDC just changed, so what is our policy? Is it changing? Nope, we're sticking with the kid has to be running a fever of this to not be seen, or have these other symptoms, and those are the only reasons we're denying care to that patient. So I think that may be one little tidbit or takeaway. Same thing for staff. The decision that you were just making with the staff member who had close contact with her kids, just knowing, okay, our policy is based on the recent CDC guidelines, and it's not saying, hey, employee, are you vaccinated? It's saying our policy is, if you're vaccinated and boosted, you can come back to work as long as you wear an N95 mask. If you are not vaccinated or boosted, then you may not come back to work for 5 days. And then when you return, you'll have to wear the N95 mask for 5 days. Then you're not saying, what are you? Are you vaccinated or not? You're just saying, our policy is this. And then the employee knows what the parameters are.
I don't know if you remember, this was happening last week when all of that was going down, and we had a thread amongst our leadership team. And it was funny to me because, the one team lead was keeping us all up to date, apprising us of the situation and what was going on with this employee whose kid, she had to leave early. And so I pull up the COVID and I, put that on the thread. And then the other team lead, who's usually the rules follower, like she's the one who's high up on HR rules and this rule, like she's the rules follower, And she came back with, well, I think she can just come back as long as she wears an N95. Mm-hmm. And so I just did not expect that from her. I don't know if you caught that or not, but I was like, is this the person who just wrote this text? Like, who just wrote this? Because she's usually the one. And I was like, well, if you can find that in the CDC, like if there's something more updated that says that, because what I'm reading, that's the most updated one, like I just pulled it up, the one I just read said that if you are unvaccinated, then you need to stay home for 5 days.
Right. And
then come back with your N95. And what this team lead was saying was, no, she can come back. She just wears her N95. And I was like, well, you know, by the time that I just pulled it up, the CDC could have changed their mind already. So maybe like 3 minutes later, there's a new guideline. Great. If you can point me to that spot, I'll hit refresh and then it'll pop up. Great. So that's what we'll go with. But so my response to her was like, get me something from the CDC. So for me, that's kind of what has been my, like, what I hide behind.
Yeah.
If a patient saying something or a staff member saying something, I'm like, well, I'm going by this guideline. Mm-hmm. And that's what, quote, keeps it fair in my mind, because what I don't want is one employee saying, well, she got to come back, or she got to do this and he got to do that. And it's back to that whole nonsense again. And or a patient saying, well, we had it, last go round, that was, back in the summer maybe, or I can't remember when. It was right before things got to where it seemed better. Yeah. So it may have been at the end of the spring. I can't remember. But, the patient wanted to come in at the nth hour for a kid that was having a toothache. And there was some miscommunication, blah, blah, blah. As we dug into it, we realized what had happened. But basically, we'd had the rule for 6 months of one parent, one kid. This woman had 5 kids and wanted to bring all 5 into the office. Now our play areas are open and all of that, but back then they weren't. And she had a meltdown, and we were discriminating against her for having a large family. Mm. And I just kind of was like, you're kidding, right, ma'am? So anyway, to not be in that position again of you're discriminating against my family, sticking to that policy and guideline is really going to save you.
Having one, and then I would say if it changes, that if you're constantly following the CDC guidelines, which a lot of my clients are doing that, then the whole team and really the patient base ultimately knows we are following CDC. And if that means that they change every 2 weeks, then we're changing every 2 weeks along with the CDC. So that can be your policy. Whatever the CDC says, that's what we're doing. Or you can have your own policy that changes regardless of what the CDC is doing. And that's totally fine as well, as long as that's clearly communicated to your staff and of course your patients. And then it's logically communicated. If there was a change, so back to your point about, well, employee so-and-so got to come back and you're not allowing me to come back. If the policy did change, first of all, that should have been spread out to the team and clearly communicated, hey, we are changing our policy. This isn't a person that's going to change our policy. This is me, the owner, or the leadership team changing this policy, and y'all all need to be informed that it's this way now because I feel that way, that's fine, or because this is why I feel like this is a better policy. So I do feel like that certainty can be very helpful. And it's one of those things where initially at the start of COVID, there were policies, like you were saying in the last episode, you were constantly solving problems, constantly coming up with solutions. And so policies were a part of what was being created and all of that. And that was ever changing. So it's almost like we really need to get back to making sure, even if that's just the policy for the next 2 weeks, that has been clearly communicated to our team, and they at least have certainty that if their kid gets sick or they get sick, or a parent is calling in or a patient's calling in with whatever symptoms or whatever's happening, that they know how to handle that.
So I don't know if you remember, has it been like a month now? I'm so off with time, but whenever it was here that the CDC did the whole, if you're a healthcare worker, you can go back to work. And it's like we hadn't heard from the CDC for a little bit there. Then suddenly there was that. And I was like, what is this now? And so I came very close to, I was debating. I was like, do I say something to the team or do I not? Because honestly, this whole switcheroo, it's like, what are you even talking about? Yeah. And then is the state board going to comment on it? And what's that going to mean? Yeah. But the governor's probably not going to, we're in Texas, the governor may not comment. So I just kind of was like, it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. So should I not even bother bugging my team with it? And then I thought, no, I think this is good, because at least I'm going to convey this so that they know that changes may be coming. So I just sent out a group thread on our message thing, and I just said, hey guys, this was just released by the CDC. I don't think we're changing anything in our office right now. Stay tuned, because I'm waiting to hear from the state board and from, Texas. Like, what are we going to do? And honestly, I think the team was appreciative for that, because I thought they were maybe going to be frustrated because I didn't have an answer. Yeah. But I think they were appreciative that I acknowledged that there was a change, and that if any of them, there's some who are going to be clueless. So now that they are all aware, there's still some that are like, huh? And then there's the other bunch that probably would have gone rogue and been like, well, then this, and then that, and then that. And so this way, I just kind of nipped it in the bud and just said, hey, I'm sure y'all are reading this just like I am. I am not planning a change right now, but I will let you know.
Right.
And same for patients. So if we're ever adding or changing, but we realize somewhere in there, probably right before Omicron, it was more like, wear your mask if you feel like it. Like, if you've been vaccinated, wear your mask. And, nobody was policing that, because how do you? But when Omicron came on, then suddenly I was like, wait a minute. We had the one staff member saying, am I supposed to be making these people wear masks? I'm like, why are they not wearing masks? And we realized our last policy that we had drafted months before, because it was summertime, was wear a mask if you feel like it or don't. We're like, well, do we want to mandate it now? Do we need to go back and shut our playrooms now? Do we need, and it's like, here we go again. But point is, remembering all that and communicating that. So I was like, well, what does the message say now that the patients receive?
Right.
Because, we can't force them to put a mask on if we put on the message they receive, on the text reminder or on the door signage,
that masks are optional.
Yeah.
That it's crazy that we are back in that, because I felt like we got to a point where we could settle into a policy, but this is a time of change. And so I think if you haven't gone back and reevaluated what's my current policy, I think we definitely should, not only for the staff, but also for the patients. And then we've got to go back and look at all of our methods of communication, and is that accurate? I had a client this week that the text message reminder said, if you're experiencing any of these symptoms, or if you've come into contact with somebody diagnosed with COVID within the last 2 weeks, please call our office. And so even that was outdated based on, because they tend to follow more CDC guidelines. And so switching that to, if you've had close contact with anybody in a 5-day period, please call our office. And then even in that, they didn't want to narrow it down to, if you're non-vaccinated and have had close contact, call us, because that felt like it was going to cause problems. But just, if you've had close contact within 5 days, call our office. And then they have a very, straightforward policy, and they, again, communicated to the patient just like that. If you're vaccinated and boosted and you've had that close contact, it's completely up to you on whether you want to keep your appointment. We're fine with you coming in. If you're non-vaccinated and have had close contact, we do request that you, refrain from coming in for 5 days. And they say it just like that, and then the patient gets to make the choice. So those policies are going to need to be resurrected. We need to make sure that the team is still clear on that and talking about it more consistently right now. Maybe that's every week, maybe that's every couple weeks. Probably right now, a month is too far. If you haven't gone back and double checked what are CDC guidelines and are we changing anything, it's probably time to do that. So that's a good tangible takeaway for sure. From a, I guess, practice management side of things, like how do we deal with this schedule? Like you were saying, the day that you had your front office lady that was needing to be home with her kid that had COVID, and you're like, good, because we don't have any patients. What are your thoughts on that? Do you feel like that's hit your practice pretty hard, where you've had a lot of days fall apart, or?
We have, but I think for us, it's a little bit more we expect it in a pedo practice, because school just went back. So we know we're going to be slower. And then we know for Monday in Texas, we get MLK off, which is going to be Monday. So we are anticipating that being busy.
Yeah.
So it'll be really interesting to see if that falls apart, because it's the first school holiday after schools have gone back. So typically it usually drops off anyway. And schools here were back, I think the latest was the 6th. And then usually it's pretty slow until MLK. So to me, it hasn't felt slower than that. And maybe that's why it feels harder, because usually it drops off, but we still have more staff. And because we're short-handed, it feels like we're working a lot harder, even with fewer patients.
When you should have had a feeling of reprieve or break, you haven't had that. That's a really good point that I didn't think about.
I didn't either until I just said it. But I think that may be where our exhaustion's still coming from, because we're still short-handed.
Because y'all powered through the holidays, and normally you get this break afterwards, but you've been super short-staffed during this quote-unquote break, and so it hasn't felt like a break.
Right. So anyway, but to your point and your question, if you're not a ped office and you're used to this being a busier time, then trying to strategize and go. And I'm not one who brings in temps from temp agencies. I would rather... Honestly, I'd rather just cancel patients. Like in the rare time that we've had that happen, we kind of tell patients that morning and start saying, we're going to have unusually long wait times. We are very short-handed today. Do you want to reschedule?
Yeah.
So I think for me, and I can get away with that because I scale. There's a lot of things that I, as the doctor, can step in and be the person to help. And because it's my practice, I can quarterback it a number of different ways. So if you're not comfortable doing that, or you don't want to do that, or incapable of doing it, whatever it may be, then you've kind of got to figure out. But to me, the temp thing is always like, I feel like we create far more work for ourselves having a temp. And maybe I'm just too cheap, like paying that money to somebody who knows really nothing. And when I say nothing, like you're going to be of minimal help to us because there's a certain way we do things. So I don't really know what to say about that.
Well, and I think to your point, temp agency, the temps have always been expensive. They're exponentially expensive now. And so I think I can certainly understand the hesitation of if our consistent norm has been the schedule has been falling apart, then man, to pull that trigger and first of all, try to get a temp because they're still in hot demand, but also second of all, to be able to pay that temp and have a productive enough schedule to make it make sense. There's a lot of risk involved in that.
Because I was cheap before all of this. Like, I was cheap when they were, like, normal temp fees, not COVID temp fees. So, I can't even imagine right now.
Yeah, it's high across the board. And so...
I'd have to have an assistant come in with unicorn wings, man. Like, you better knock me... And there's no way that's going to happen. Yeah. And so, for me to be frustrated all day that you're not... Like, I've had to coach you so much through the day and probably do a lot of it myself. I'm not going to pay the money. Yeah,
paying a premium for that. So yeah, I think it's worth hesitating on, is temp the only option, or is there an alternative option? Can I, as the doctor, step in and do maybe more than I'm used to? Or is there a way that we can run the schedule a little bit more? Yes, it's lean and it's going to be tighter, but can I run that schedule strategically where I don't have to have a temp that day? So I think it's worth trying to solve the schedule problem. If an office has made the investment in bringing on a temp and they've been lucky enough to get one, it may be the type of thing where we want to intentionally pad the schedule a little bit, where we don't just plan kind of our perfect, well lined out day, but we anticipate we've had consistent cancellations. I mean, in all honesty, any practice can put hardcore math to it. I mean, it's one of the things that I tend to do when I go into practices. It's like, okay, let's look back at the last 2 weeks. Out of every day, if we had 30 people scheduled every day and we've consistently had 3 or more cancel, well, then we're losing 10% off the schedule every day. Okay, we can pad it 10%. We can add 3 extra patients to the schedule, knowing that we're going to lose a few patients off the schedule. Now we lose the control of that because we don't know which patients are going to cancel. We don't know. We haven't been able to manipulate this perfect day. But if we've invested in a temp and we want to ensure that we get our money's worth, then it might be worth padding the schedule that day. In our last leadership meeting, we even talked about that. And again, your hesitation at that point was staffing was such an issue that we couldn't really decide.
That's where I feel like I've been teetering, because you've been telling us for a while that we are probably underbooking and shooting ourselves in the foot by underbooking. But my fear in that is we are drowning every day, and I think this is why, because exactly what we just said 2 or 3 minutes ago, when you look at it on paper, it doesn't look like it's that dramatic of a schedule. But then you come in and you're like, there was only 3 of us to work this schedule. And I can't imagine it being padded even 10 more %. Like, I don't want to risk that because it's all I can do to manage this.
Exactly.
And different story if I know my whole team is going to be there, or, if there were supposed to be 9 of us, then maybe there's 7 of us or 8 of us. But if I'm looking at maybe there's 5 of us, I really can't.
And I think that's an important thing to think about. Like, for owners like you, and there's plenty of them that are just like, I can't think like that because my staff has been just as unpredictable as the schedule has been. Then it really becomes, again, I firmly believe this is going to be short-lived. But I also know that there's practices that they have to make a certain amount to be able to survive over the next couple of months. There's not PPP, money that's coming at us this time. And so I think we've got to go, okay, if we know staff is going to continue to be unpredictable and the schedule is going to continue to fall apart, then let's figure out the bottom dollar of what I'm going to have to make to feed my staff and to feed myself over the next couple months that we're walking through this. And then you've got that number in your mind, and that's what you aim for. And that means, sure, we're not overbooking it, but as long as we're getting that bare minimum, because I think there's always a preferred amount that we would like to make or the practice needs to produce. And then there's like we can't produce any less than this, or I'm going to not be able to pay myself. Figure out what that number is and remove the pressure of your preferred number and go, you know what? Yeah, we didn't produce $5,000 a day. We produced 3. And 3 is what it takes to feed myself and my family and my staff.
Keep the lights on and
exactly.
do all that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's funny when you say that. I think the problem we used to always have, it wasn't filling the schedule. It was the unpredictable staff. We've always had a hard time with that. And I feel like now we've got both. The unpredictability of the patients and the unpredictability of the staff, and which is making it really, really difficult to try to get some semblance of normalcy going and make some decisions. You know, it's really hard to do that.
It's hard to move forward. It's like, I'm just in this kind of tornado spinning, and I'm in the center of that, trying to navigate as best we can.
Well, I don't want to take us off topic here, but so then my next line of thinking is, if y'all listen to the last podcast, COVID Part 1, whatever you're going to title it, but I had an employee that is the last one I would have thought, because she has not begged to be on the team, but she kind of has really made it very obvious that she wants to be part of our practice. Well, she gave her 2 weeks at the end of the year last year. And it was I'm going to say it was a blessing in disguise. I certainly wasn't, business-wise, it was probably a really good thing. Emotional-wise, it's harder for me. But really, she was probably going to be fired at some point. She knew it, we knew it. We'd just been not pulling the Band-Aid for so long. She finally just pulled it on herself. So I think the only hesitation that gave me, though, is I would not have thought she would be the one to leave. So now I'm looking at the rest of my team going, well, which other ones of you might be leaving? And so I kind of go back so what I'm doing in my own head is going, who do I think is reasonably here to stay? What's hard to think about that, because that part of me is like, why don't you just ask them? Well, I can't ask them in this climate, because as y'all know from my mentality of, I don't want you holding me by my balls here. If you know something, I got to play cool. I got to play cool and not show my cards here. All of you could leave and I won't care. So I've kind of got to figure out how I can try to figure out strategically who might stay for a while. So how I'm doing that is, and in my mind, at year end, we're always looking at what was your total compensation package and all of that. And there's a couple that I'm like, even if you left, like if I wanted you to leave or you wanted to leave, you are not going to make this nice a package. You would be really dumb to leave. And some of them are not savvy enough to look at that, but the ones that are, I'm like, okay, I could probably safely say, short of a true crisis in your life or you got married and moved, short of anything like that, you guys are probably here to stay. So of that core group, then should I maybe function with that's who I'm going to have and plan that out for the next 6 months? We had one conversation that you and I have not gotten so deep into, but one of our hygienists who's been with us for 3 years, and we adore her. Well, she's pregnant right now, and a team lead said, I wouldn't be at all surprised if she didn't end up coming back, even though she's saying she's going to come back. But I think as dentists, we've always been, as not even dentists, as I should say a business owner, the thought always is, I don't know for anybody else, but for me it is, once you're pregnant, you're probably gone.
Yeah.
Like, I should not be surprised if you don't come back. Yeah. Like, if I've got my heart set on you coming back, I'm only setting myself up for disappointment. So
Right.
it would be nice if you did. You're saying you're going to, but who really knows, right? So I think in my mind, I'm like, okay, she's going to leave. Or the team lead was saying, well, if this, if that. And I said, okay, well, why don't we just go with the assumption then that she's not coming back?
Right.
Like, we should probably plan for that she's not coming back. So what are we going to do in that case? Because that's kind of worst case scenario. So I think for me then, I'm kind of mitigating the people. Now, unless one of those people surprises me, I'm going to be caught way off guard. But just looking at it from a mathematical, business, logical standpoint, I've probably got this group of 6 that I don't think are going anywhere. And so should I plan my strategy around the 6?
Right.
And go from there, and then adjust. Maybe, who knows, maybe this windfall of all these people moving into Texas, and there's now this long back list again of all these assistants out of nowhere, or the government decides if you're a dental assistant, you're going to get paid by the government. Like, you never know, like, what nonsense is going to come in, and suddenly there's this surplus of help. Great. Then I might change my strategy at that point, but I think I'm functioning from a doomsday conspiracy going, okay, I may only have like 6 people total on my team.
Right.
And so what am I going to do with that? And so,
which I think is a good strategy, because you're building your plan around the most predictable few.
It's the most control I have.
It is.
Back to control. That's where I have a little bit of control.
Yeah. It really is. And I feel like that's a good, healthy strategy, because it gives you like, okay, here's almost worst case scenario, but I'm going to build around worst case scenario. And then if best case scenario happens to come along, then yay. But let's plan around and build a practice around almost worst case scenario, or at least the most predictable thing that I can kind of build a foundation on. So I think that's a great strategy to have. And I think it's worthwhile for every practice owner to go through and look and go, barring some crazy life event, I feel like this is my predictable crew, and I'm gonna move forward and build a practice around those people, and almost assume that I'm gonna lose everybody else at some point. And I think that's an okay mindset to have, to be perfectly honest.
And sorry, I didn't mean to go on that tangent. I know this is more about the predictability of the patients.
Still, I think that's
but they do feed off each other. Like,
it's the chicken or the egg. Which comes first. I mean, you got a schedule falling apart that leads us directly back to staff, and sometimes the schedule falling apart is a blessing because we've got nobody working today. And then sometimes it's a negative. I've got the schedule falling apart, and I paid for temps to come in, and now it's cost me time. So I feel like it's just so intricately connected, it's really hard to dissect the two. But awesome. Well, can you think of any other thoughts or comments on this dadgum COVID resurgence, or any other ways that it's hit you?
I have no words. I have no good words.
I know. My encouragement to you, of course, and I think to all listeners, is I really do feel like we're in that dark moment again. It feels like we're walking into this dark moment more fatigued than we were the last time. But I think if you guys can kind of power through, just again, view it as I'm being planted. I'm deep down in the soil, and I know it's hurting. It's not feeling good right now, but I do think there's ways that it's going to turn at some point, whether that's 6 weeks from now, whether that's 2 months from now, heck, whether that's 6 months from now. I do feel like it's going to turn. It's just this other little spell we've got to get through.
Well, and this is why I need you in my life, because you're Miss Glass Half Empty. My take on it is, well, I'm in the dirt, and either I stay here and let the worms eat me, but what is my other choice? Like, what is my other plan? And I don't have one right now. So I guess then I got to put all my eggs in this one basket and keep being a dentist and a dental practice owner. But should anything come along that'll keep me from being eaten by this worm, I might jump ship. I don't know yet, but because this may or may not, Omicron, Zomicron, Gilicon, whoever may come around next, some other variant. And so in my mind, like, what am I doing then? And this is really still the best thing that honestly does bring me the most joy when it does of anything that I do, and it pays the bills.
Yeah.
And so here we are.
Yeah, here we are.
Don't have another choice.
I wish this was visual so we could have a big old to be continued ... that falls at the end of it. It feels like we're leaving the listeners on a cliffhanger. So we'll.
What's the cliffhanger?
What will Kuba do? Didn't we have an episode? What will Kuba do, or what would Kuba do?
Well, I mean, Kuba's going to survive. I'm going to make this work because I don't have another choice. I don't know what else I'm going to do.
Yeah.
And I don't want to take the deep dive just yet. I don't think I'm ready to fall off the cliff just yet. And I don't think I have another mountain that's calling my name at the moment. So I am here for the long haul, whether I like it or not.
Yeah. And you're not alone.
I'm not alone.
There we go. Well, thanks for chatting with me about it today. I appreciate it. Y'all have a good one. We're thinking about you guys.
Thanks for joining the conversation today. We hope that you are comforted in knowing that you are not alone, but we also hope that you're walking away with some really great tips and tricks to try in your practice. We value your feedback, so please take a few moments to rate and review the podcast. Finally, we want to make sure that we're covering the topics that matter to you. So track us down on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and let us know what topics you want us to cover. As always, please know that we are rooting for you today as you manage your dental drama.